We should be close to live right now. That's what the little note up in the corner says. Says that we're live. So we're live. Come on in, everybody. We see you out there. The chat's open. Chat's open. We're waiting. We're waiting here for you. Look at this group that we've assembled already, and there might be even more people coming in as we talk. This is the ZimmCast for the 10th of August already, 2022. So I think we're just going to open with our regular opening, and then we'll get to introductions, and we'll go from there. As soon as he scrolls down to the open. Okay, here we are.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
Wait a minute, that's not it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunderbirds are go.
Oh, I had a little warning thing that would pop up in there too. I'm going to have to incorporate that in. Here it is.
Warning. The following program is rated TV-MADLSV and is intended for mature audiences. Expect adult expletives, adult situations, and video clips of people you might find offensive. The opinions expressed in this podcast are entirely the responsibility of the person speaking and or typing, and in no way meant to reflect the opinions of the Ragin 2 podcast network. No children, small pets, floppy titties, or Russian bots were harmed bringing this podcast to you. Thank you.
And have a nice day. Hey, everybody, come on in. We see you out there. Hit that like button. Hit that love button. So we're here to talk about our favorite subject. It's for most of us, it's funny book. Right, Brian?
That's right.
Okay. I'm your host, Randy Zimmerman. I am a longtime alternative and independent comics creator, publisher, whatever. I've been in this business for decades and done it all pretty much except work for the big two. But got this close a couple times. Didn't quite get there. Thank goodness. So sometimes fate is good to me. But other than that, we're all here. We've assembled a great group of people, and like I said, there's more coming. So at this point, I'd like to bring on Peter Palmiotti. Peter, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I am Peter Palmiotti. You can find me across the webs, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, under my name. Yeah, I've been in the industry for a little over 30 years. I have worked for Marvel, DC, Valiant, even published by Image, but mostly worked for small independent companies and working on my own retro, which I hope to get done this year and go to Indiegogo for a full campaign.
Sweet. And you've got another campaign that you're in the process with right now called Designated? Right, Designated.
Yes.
We'll talk about that here in a minute.
It's on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're on Kickstarter. Also joining us tonight is Justin K. Sweet. Justin, Agent Zero. Introduce yourself. Are you there?
Hi, I'm Agent Zero. Hopefully there's not much of a delay here, but anyway, yeah, you can find me on Twitter, at Justin K. Sweet. I'm currently doing my best to do two things. One, produce a comic book and or build out a world that's going to feature a few titles. And the second thing is I'm trying to get spinner racks in some local grocery stores, bodegas, there even a card shop to try to actually garner floppies being put in the hands of kids again, and also young adults, I guess, because I'm trying to solicit a vape shop. I did manage to get a spinner rack full of Alterna comics and a few Arrow comics in a hemp shop here in Tennessee. We actually have, believe it or not, there is a legal version of marijuana that can be sold here. So that's pretty cool. So, regardless, just out here just trying to prove the concept, because I really believe that spinner racks should come back and get these tablets out of these kids' hands, because they need to be reading comic books.
There you go. Yep. Can't argue with that. Also joining us is Mitch Rogers. Mitch, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mitch Rogers. I'm a 14-year veteran of the indie comics world. Horror writer, artist, creator. My flagship title is The Boger, which you can find on To Pass and Global Comics online.
Are you still adding to Tapas?
Yeah.
Okay. So I read somewhere they were either peeling back or doing something with original content.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, for now, it's on Tapas.
Okay.
Tomorrow, maybe not.
Who knows? Mark, how are you?
Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
You're not late. You're just, yeah, pretty much on time. We're still waiting for a couple other people, so it's okay. You're good.
Cool.
He arrives precisely when he means to.
Exactly right.
There was when I was in high school, I had this first period class that I was always late for, and one time I was so late, I got into the class as the bell was ringing for the class to end, and they're like, "He's not late. He's just early for tomorrow."
That's right.
There you go.
Yep. Mark, you might as well introduce yourself since you're
Nice.
just here.
I just appeared. Hi, this is Mark Torres with the King from Radio, the official of the Big Apple Con. I've been hosting a radio show on the actual radio and online for almost 20 years. Our 20th anniversary is going to be next year. And I'm also the writer and creator of the comic book Designated, which is currently on Kickstarter.
Cool. All right. And in the middle, there along the bottom, is Mr. Brian K. Morris. Brian,
Greetings.
introduce yourself.
Will do. I'm Brian K. Morris, Rising Tide Publications. I am an independent publisher, freelance editor of comic books, and award-winning playwright, an award-winning short story author, Facebook famous YouTuber, and former mortician's assistant. So, there I am. And I also came this close to like the big leagues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you stop being the assistant mortician? That's the question I want to know.
I wouldn't take my supervisor to our weekly meetings, and he got mad and fired me, so...
It's a great job. You just couldn't dig it.
I was the most reliable guy in town, because I'm the last guy to let you down.
Yeah. There you go. So, everybody, hey, that Valiant, you think they're dead?
Maybe.
That's just how they smell.
Okay, I guess that was a bad
I haven't
segue.
One way to say it.
Sorry.
Are they
Couldn't
still
find it.
publishing?
Okay, that answers everything. Right there.
Well, I
Good answer.
have
Are they still
I have this
publishing?
question that I have a printing question that I can't get anyone to answer me on.
That's
I've
what
got
we're
a
here for.
Valiant. I've got a Geomancer #1 from back in the day,
In the day.
and that
yes.
cover is in the day. That cover is it's like a chromium embossed cover, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have the card backing on it, and
Okay.
so I don't know where those can be sourced. I'd love to throw Chrome Dog in something like that, but man,
That would
could
be
show- I
a
could show
question
it.
to ask your personal printer to see if they know of anybody. Because
Yeah.
back in the 90s and 2000s, everybody was
Yeah.
going a little
Wild
crazy
West,
with
huh?
gimmicky covers. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had, flip covers, and you had embossed covers, you had invisible covers, you had imprinted covers, virgin covers. There's everything kind of sprung up from those wonderful variant days. Glow in the dark covers.
Mhm.
So it was a little bit of everything. So a lot of the printing abilities have moved on depending upon how they got it done, where they got it done. But your actual printer might be able to know how to get that done for you. It's like I wanted to get a Big Little book printed until I took it to my printer. And once he stopped laughing, he told me that they no longer use, the same presses that they used to use back in the 1930s, that the printing process has gotten better since then, and they can't fold something that small unless you really want to pay a lot of money.
So I guess the answer is how much money you want to spend.
Exactly. That's what he said. I can get it done for you.
Right.
It won't be cheap. It won't be cheap. And there'll probably be some extra cuts or whatever and cost you an arm and a leg. And that explains why the last 10, 20 years, whenever I saw something in that format, it was really expensive. We're talking $25-$30 a hit for a little 4x4 square book. And I was like, holy crap. But now I know why. So it doesn't quite work the way it used to, when they could just take a great big sheet of newsprint and fold it down origami style and do 3 trims on it and put some sort of a binding on it and call it a book.
My favorite alternative cover was something my brother instigated, which was an issue of Punisher where I forget how it happened, but he turned black for a couple of issues or something. And so they put a paper bag cover over it, which was his idea. And it worked. It sold.
Well, that comes back from the day of the old Skin magazines, where they used to mail them wrapped in brown paper wrappers, little brown wrappers. You just put a stamp on it and then your address and ship it out to you. So the postman would always, be bending that magazine in order to try to look in to see what it looked like. So, which made it great for the mailbox by the time it got there. But yeah, and I think there were a couple issues of Hustler that were intentionally printed with a brown paper wrapper on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So back in the day,
Back when we had to read our porn on paper.
Exactly.
Or you had to spend the first part of your winter going out and looking for pornography, so you had enough for your whole family to last you till the spring and the new hunt began. Yeah.
You had to store it, then you had to kill it.
That's right. Skin it.
Skin it.
Oh, skin it, yeah.
Yeah.
Dry it. Figure out how to can it. Yeah. Exactly. 2 miles.
Yeah, uphill both ways. Barefoot in the snow.
Barefoot in the snow.
Yeah, and for some reason, I never thought to go down the way I came.
Yeah.
I just, went up one hill, then go home. I went up another hill. It was weird.
Exactly. All right. Anybody got anything else to talk about? Hey, since that Valiant subject went over like a lead balloon.
Well, I've been bringing this up a lot recently because I just heard about it, and I find this subject fascinating about that whole C2E2 Black Flag variant cover thing. Have you guys heard about that?
I saw a video on it in passing, but go ahead and talk about it.
So it's a whole bunch of a lot of things happening, but the essentially thing was that Black Flag Comics is a comic book store, I guess, and they were selling, then they bought a variant from Marvel and DC for Ultimate Fallout issue number 4. It came out last year in November.
Mm-hmm.
Then they decided that they want to have a C2E2 exclusive. And so they went out on their own without Marvel's permission and got an acetate cover and stapled it on to the existing variant cover and saying it's a new variant cover. Then they went and sold that for $85 initially, and then while people were waiting on the line to get it, they were selling it for $100 when they realized how well it was selling. The kicker is that some of these books were graded by CGC at a 10.0, 9.8. So the issue is, how can CGC grade something that's a variant at that high numbers that Marvel said was not solicited?
And how soon is Marvel going to launch that lawsuit?
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't know if they are going to make a lawsuit because it's such a small amount. But I think the precedent is what this is about. Like, who's going to stop the next guy from doing it?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's conversations going on right now with Marvel and Black Flag Comics that I initially commissioned the first variant. That's saying, hey, you know, we made a second variant. You're not supposed to do that. And like, oh, we didn't know. But did they really not know? You know, it's kind of one of those things.
Not only that, but wouldn't that knock the value of the book down, because that's technically defacing the comic?
Right.
Right, but it's a CGC 10.0. So now is CGC going to go back on their grading? And if they go back on this grading, is there any other gradings they're going to go back on? So it's a whole can of worms that I find very interesting.
Well, that's what you get when you start having it graded like that by because it's only somebody's opinion, that number is. But anymore, that number is so important on a slab book. It's not even funny. And I've seen a lot of guys post articles where they'd send a book in and get it rated, have it come back, then they'd open it and then do whatever cosmetically to it and send it back and get a higher grading.
Yeah.
Without telling them that they had graded that book previous.
Right.
You know, I saw a 4.0 go up to at least a 8 or 7.
Wow.
By them making a couple of changes here and there. So it's pretty odd, and it's very subjective when you go through and put that grading on. But anymore, that grading is so important because there's such a huge difference between a 9.0 and a 9.8. And having a 10, I don't know how that happens.
Right.
I've never seen a 10 out in the wild of anything.
This is on. They sold them a 10 of this altered comic book, which they said was an official variant, which it really wasn't. That's the whole crazy thing. And if you look online, you can find out what CGC is saying. They're like, we stand by our grading, but then that was before Marvel said it wasn't an authorized variant. So now it's all wait and see. This just happened because this was last weekend. So it's very interesting how the story is forming and where do you stand on it.
Yeah, and I can't see Marvel. Granted, this may be a low enough print run that they normally might let something like this fly under the radar. But I can also see some, a very greedy company like, Disney saying, we don't want people to be making money off of our stuff until we do it.
Yeah.
And I can see somebody getting a Marvel legal to and get a warning shot 6 inches below the water lines on this one. So,
you would probably have to make enough as much money as an average NFT before that happens. Because I know DC served a couple of artists for selling NFTs of their character and told them never to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, if nothing else, this might be a copyright violation. They're not going to stand for that.
I don't know, because they're not claiming copyright. They're just claiming a variant on it. It's not like the Black Flag is going through and putting their stamp or their copyright to it. They just went through and altered it enough to call it a new variant. And, that would have taken them having to unstaple the book and then restaple the book.
Well, it has 4 staples, so they just stapled it on top.
Oh, they just double stapled.
Yeah.
And again, it's a defacing of a book then.
That's a 10.0. That's
and that
how crazy is that?
Be a 10.0. That should be a 9.5 minimum or maximum.
Yeah.
That's just, you're right. It just seems really weird, and they're going to have to alter their rules. I don't know how they slid it past the graders, because that's technically 2 more 4 more holes in that book. That weren't
actually,
there.
Brian, you brought up an interesting point that Disney will be like cracking on anything. I remember there was a person who wanted to have a Mickey Mouse on their tombstone because they were a huge Disney fan, and they were like, no, and they made him take it off of the tombstone.
There's a daycare they sued.
Yes,
because someone painted Disney characters on the wall.
Really?
Yeah. About 10 years ago, yeah.
We had a bar up here named Jiminy Crickets, and they weren't even using a mascot with that likeness, and they still came in and sent them a cease and desist.
That's a public domain character.
It is,
isn't it?
Yeah.
But they're pushing their weight around. Do you really want to, die on that hill?
They did go after Shrek, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I guess they would have to care enough to bring the suit. That would be the thing. But again, they're not claiming law. They're not claiming copyright on it. They're not defaming. the copyright
Mm-hmm.
to detract it from, Disney's pull, I would be surprised if Disney lawyers did step in on it. They'll probably stay out of it and say, "Hey, this is such a specialty market. It's just like their current comic books. They just don't care.
Yeah.
That's why all these
no.
characters are running rampant, or the so-called talent is running rampant over there with these characters and making all these drastic changes. They don't care."
So what do you guys think how this would affect the grading system and CGC at all? Because realistically, CGC is saying this is an official thing at a 10.0, and it's not.
No, you're right. I agree with you. I agree that this is. I think CGC is like denying reality, one that they helped establish.
Yes.
Yeah.
They don't dare walk it back.
Especially
at this point, but I think they should.
Since 10.0s are just super rare. How many other 10.0s have you ever seen out there in the wild?
Yeah, very few.
Even all of the value sites that I watch, like the great Comic Tom, who talks about comic values all the time and shakes his finger constantly. The highest they ever talk about is a 9.8.
Yeah.
I can't say I've ever seen a 10.0, and I've had friends that have sent books straight out of the print box, in immaculate condition to CGC for grading, and they've come back 9.8.
Mm-hmm.
So having it come through a 10.0, that's, I question that validity.
I wonder if there's some like backdoor goings on to get that. If it's so rare, and here's an altered variant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, technically that's four more holes in the comic that weren't there before.
Yeah.
And a staple or a cover attached to it. Even your double covers aren't graded like that, are they? They're not graded as a regular book. They're a defect because they have a double cover printed up,
Right.
or they're stapled with a double cover.
Yeah, it would have to be like a special cover or acetate or something in the notes, right?
Notation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah.
It's just wild to me. Like, all right, so everybody just start making their own comics and putting their own covers on and selling it as exclusives.
Think of all of there's a whole market out there then putting covers on coverless books. It'd be great.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea, actually. Give them a second life or something. Or could you imagine like getting the same cover stock that they use for blank covers and taking it to some pro and saying, would you draw a new version of the cover? Now you have a limited 1 out of 1 run.
Yeah.
And I see the look of terror in Mark's eyes as I'm saying.
Wow, this is it changes the industry. This little thing.
I know. I for the last half century, I've been thinking of ways to subvert the comic book industry, and pray I never put this to paper.
Are you part of Black Flag Comics without us knowing? Is that what's going on here?
No, the Illuminati and I are being very careful about how we monitor the market and guide it. So,
especially since most comics never lose their value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Heritage has been making a lot of landmark sales lately.
Yeah, they have.
A lot.
Yeah, original art, original runs.
And the whole market in general. I understand original art going up, absolutely. And a lot of this is the market catching up to these masters that are a lot of them are passing or no longer doing work or whatever. And I understand that's a limited commodity, especially with the way now the big guys encourage everybody to go digital because it's so much easier to ship things through the email ether than it is FedEx, across the country or across the world. But comics themselves, it's such a niche market. The comic itself is only worth what you can get the next person to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's true.
Like records and VHSs.
Yeah, well, a lot of the old vinyl records are jumping, but they're it's like comics. It's only key prints, and the rarer the print, the better. So, who knows whether that makes a legitimate rare print or not? I guess that'll be up to the collector in the long run. You know, it's not like you can sit there and enjoy it once it's slabbed. It's like, hey, look, it's an acetate cover. And the acetate's got certain key parts of the drawing covered over for another bit. I used to have encyclopedias. My parents had encyclopedias like that where they showed the human body, and the first acetate layer was the skin, then the muscles, then the organs. You know, right down to the skeletal frame. You know, that's pretty much what they did here. Is they made an acetate layer over top of it, and then there's key pieces that are replaced.
Yeah. My favorite album had that as the cover, Tools Lateralis. It was like this, like mystical, mystical guy, and I mean, like it would, you know, there's like, you know, the ore was on one acetate, then the body and all that.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah,
I was amazed by that stuff when I was little.
And that was a special print too. That album's probably worth a bit of money.
I'm sure it is.
Or at pressing, I should say. Yeah, but that's back when you had album art that was amazing, and just they were doing all sorts of crazy things, just like they did back in the '90s and 2000s, like what Justin was talking about with the chrome covers and all of that. So, yeah, crazy times. Whether you'll keep having that, especially now that we're in the digital age, is you know, all of that older stuff will probably become more valuable. The less and less of it that's done, you know, in the market, as long as this market stays viable. Yeah. So there was a while there that it looked like vinyl records were going to be totally worthless, and some of them are. But
well, I found out there is actually like a subculture that still is producing 8-track tapes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know Bare Naked Ladies were doing some of their albums on 8-track tapes because they had a subset in their fandom that they put them out just as a joke, and they're like, yeah, we want more. So
it's finding those players that would be the problem.
Probably so, but it's like on eBay, I know that I had some friends that used to own Betamaxes.
Sure, I have had a Betamax at one time.
I have a few.
Yeah, and there is like again, a very niche audience in eBay that basically just trade parts from old machines to keep their current ones running. And I can just imagine now that we have like the 3D printers, you know, maybe we'll see a resurgence in videotape or Betamax.
And there were a lot of those parts that were plastic too. You just have to figure out how to tool it.
That's true.
The program to print it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a huge subculture of VHS collectors for the past decade.
Yeah.
I'm one of them. I own a whole bunch of them.
Same here. Yeah.
I got a room over there. Yeah. Paperbacks, VHSs, CDs, old DVDs. Yeah. The wife's got every Dark Shadows episode on VHS tape. So.
Ooh.
Even though now she can just call it up on streaming and watch everything. You know.
So is it weird? Do you actually like see the old stuff? Is like does it compare? Because I know I had like a whole stuff about just old tapes. And I put one in. I was like, man, that quality isn't the best.
Now the tapes demagnetize over years, so you'll be down. Yeah. You know, anything that you've recorded, especially, will degenerate over time, and then eventually disintegrate.
Yeah.
But we ran out to a couple of pawn shops and bought some VHS players when they started becoming rare. It's not like we pull them out and dust them off, because I used to have a TV set here that could play them, but you can't even hook them up to a regular TV anymore because all of that, the technology has surpassed that or made it obsolete, really.
Yeah.
You'd have to get a special converter, and their Radio Shacks aren't around anymore. And you walk into a Best Buy and you get this funny look on their face, like, you want a what?
Yeah.
I don't think we carry that. You might have to go someplace else. Yeah.
Yeah, I went in one day and I was looking for a micro cassette because I still had a micro cassette recorder that I used to do interviews with, and the I'll say it, the kid that waited on me looked at me like I was one step from the hospice. You know, it's like asking if I come with subtitles or something. That they were like calling other people. Have you heard of this thing? And I was like, oh god.
Look, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Did you just sound? You just recorded sound on this? That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, this is how the technology changes. I remember I worked for an Office Depot back in the mid '90s, and I had one of the younger people on the floor. I was in my 30s at the time, and I had one of the younger people on the floor come by in a panic. Goes, "Oh, I got this guy in this one aisle, and he says we've got this one product. I've never even heard of it, and he's getting cranky. And oh, Brian, please come help me." So I go, "Okay, fine." And the guy just looked at me, and he was about maybe a few years older than I was. He just looked at me and went, "Carbon paper." And so we bonded. We were making fun of the kid.
What's that?
Yeah, it's like, and at the time, typewriters were on the way out too. So
yeah,
we've got a typewriter repair place in town. It's like, what do you do all day?
I remember when I was in high school scratching comic strips into the old mimeograph paper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I used silly putty.
Used to what? Silly putty?
I used silly putty. Get the image of the comic strip.
Yes.
Onto silly putty.
That actually worked?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It now took some of the ink off too.
The wonders of printing ink. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you could stretch it.
Yeah.
Sure. Sigh, those were the days. Everybody's looking at us like we're crazy.
I know.
What's silly putty?
Yeah, exactly.
I heard stories, but I didn't know it was actually possible.
Yeah. We usually save this kind of conversation for the Sunday Funnies program that's on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. It's also archived over at the Raging 2 network.
Right. Yeah, that's where we go and talk about things like collecting old comics and honoring the hunt with the paintings we put on the walls and everything. The
spiral rack quests that we all used to go on when we were when we were kids, back in like Justin said, back in the day. And Justin got chased off by his internet. Apparently, they didn't like him on our program, so he's going to try to get back on.
Okay. When did the day end?
All depends on how old you are.
Yeah.
Because for some, the day is longer than others.
Yes.
Okay.
Or shorter, depending upon how young you are. But it was back. That's just back in your youth, whenever that was. Everybody's youth was different, so and a different starting point.
I'm old enough that I remembered buying Batmans in the grocery store off the rack.
And every store had a rack of comics.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew I knew where every store was in a 20-mile radius of my house.
Yep.
And made the rounds as often as possible. You're going to Flushing? I'm going with you. I might have to walk 3 more blocks over here to catch that spiral rack, or to see that. The drugstore in Flushing always had a great selection of black and white magazines. That was great. That's how I found the Spirit, from those old Warren magazines. What's this weird guy with a mask? That's funny. I've never seen this guy before. Yeah.
Love the Spirit.
Oh yeah.
That stuff is 8 stories in one issue. Those were great. It's like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And how they compressed a whole story down to 7 pages was just. That's my love of short stories started right there. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And then that stretched out to all the other Warren magazines, and then, to the Marvel stuff, and just worked out from there. Great times. So Unknown Worlds of Science Fiction. Remember that magazine? That was a great magazine when that was out.
Super. That was really
phenomenal.
Good.
Yeah.
So you guys used to get stuff from the spinner racks. Do you remember when you actually went to your first comic book store?
Yes. I can even tell you where it was. It was in Providence, Rhode Island, 1977. I want to say June. I was living out east at the time with my uncle. I was taking care of his house while he was undergoing surgery. And he said, I heard there's this place that all they sell is comic books. And I'm like, this becomes now the quest, to gaze upon this golden, opportunity, this golden land here. And I walk in the door, and they're seriously, it's like what we all dreamed of, or what we used to see back in the day. Nothing but comics on the walls, on the racks, in the boxes, and I was just like transfixed. And so I came back, when I came back to, I was living in Illinois at the time, and I went to this one store that used to sell, comics. They just put them on the table because they were selling like used paperbacks and stuff, and that's how they kept the kids quiet while mom's buying Harlequins. And I told him about this, and it turns out he had already been looking into this. So, but I still remember that shop in Providence. I couldn't tell you what the name was. I couldn't tell you if it's still there, but it was an eye opener.
For me, we knew that Curious Bookshop had a floor of comics. They were right across from Michigan State University here in Lansing. Mm-hmm. But we had one of the first direct distributors spring up that was here in the state called Big Rapids Comics.
Yeah.
And I worked at I would stop at a bookstore that had an adult aisle that would get direct comics from Big Rapids. And I thought that was cool. I ended up working for that bookshop. But in between that time, during my junior year, that was about 75, 76, there was a shop that opened up in Saginaw, which was 20 minutes from my house, called Libby's Comics, run by a lady, comic shop in the basement of a building. And it had that musty smell that you never forget. That's always associated with old paper and old comics. You'd walk, and it was a dank basement. It's just, she never ran a dehumidifier or anything down there, and it had that. You walk down the stairs from street level, and you just had that smell. And you'd go in. She'd have direct comics. She'd get comics also from Big Rapids.
Nice.
And then I had the first comic shop in our county, in the back of a pinball arcade. The owner had a room that was empty, and he rented it out to me and a buddy of mine. We went in together and opened a comic shop. We called it Trilogy. Put a little sign out front, Trilogy Comics, out there, and we sold comics. And then our store was visited by two other regulars that ended up starting their own shops after we shut down. So,
interesting.
And both of those shops are still open to this day.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So what possessed you to make your own comic book store?
I wanted to read comics, that was it. And this guy got them for, sent them I could get them in a box once a week, delivered to me in multiple copies, and sell comics out. That was it for me to start with. What it really started getting aggravating, because I was reading some of this stuff and it was amazing. Because I was selling Byrne Austin X-Men there. I remember Cerebus #6 coming through where he's swinging on a chandelier on the cover, and Fantasy Quarterly 1 came through. Mm-hmm. Very first Elf Quest. And I'm looking at that going, man, they misprinted this because the blue plate was off just a hair on the cover. But the story was incredible. And that really gave me the bug that, I didn't want to just sell these things. I wanted to do these things. I wanted to make them. I wanted to, create them. And then later on, when I was comic retailing after my shop shut down, and I was working at another comic shop, it just got so irritating because every Wednesday or Thursday or whenever we got the comics, and I think it was Tuesday or Thursday, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. That was before Magic Wednesdays started.
Right.
We'd bring a copy of everything back to the house and read it so that we knew what we were selling. And it always irritated me because I'm sitting through most of that stuff going, I could do better than that. This guy is terrible. That kind of thing. So I started, it got to the point where I couldn't retail anymore. I had to start creating. So.
Was that the same for you, Pete? Were you like, I can do better?
I think that's a lot of people's motivation. I never became a movie director. I never wrote novels, but I work in comics, and I still think I could do better.
Yeah. There you go. Same here.
Yep.
Yeah. What about you, Mitch? Remember your first comic shop?
Yeah, it was in. Me and my parents lived in Concord, North Carolina at the time for a few years. I cannot remember the name of it, but it was, like y'all said, that shop you walk in, it was nothing but comics. And it wasn't that big of a shop, and it had this guy behind the counter that I remember. He never spoke in an indoor voice. So I could walk in, hey, how's it going? What you looking for? It's kind of a shock. If you weren't awake, you were when you walked in the door. just as a kid, I was just amazed that there was a store that sold nothing but comic books.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, I got over to Curious as soon as I could, and bought books from there. They had a whole second story that was nothing but a comic shop. The main store was a older bookstore. So, and that's one of the longest. They're still there to this day. Only the comics have moved, I think, down to the third floor, and or down to the basement, along with the other old paper. You ever need to read some of the old grungy paperbacks from the 50s, the gratuitous stuff, that's the floor you go down to. So, yeah. All the rarer books and the hardbacks were on the main floor. Yeah. And all the oddball paper, the sports memorabilia and the magazines and stuff were up in the third now. But going up them stairs, I'll never forget, because they paid somebody to do a mural, and every time you'd go in, there'd be one or two more characters up there on that wall as you were walking up the stairs. So that was a good
Did
time.
Disney go in and try and shut them down?
Oh no. No, back then everybody had a better sense of what they were doing. Yeah. This is long before Disney owned Marvel anyway.
Before Disney owned the world.
But I do remember a gigantic Sasquatch on the wall back during
cool.
Alpha Flight days. Yeah, big. Yeah, almost life size. It was pretty cool. I don't remember the artist that did it, but like I said, you'd walk up there and you'd see a couple new characters, at least one new character every week. So it was all good. I'm not ignoring the chat. It's just we've been talking. So it came from the radio. It says, hello, future listeners. There we are. That was posted before. Yep. Guano Guy. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Worthless. Set it on fire. Yeah. Hello, all. Nicholas is in the house. Thanks, Nicholas, for listening in. Phil Leone.
Hello, Phil.
What's up, comic peeps? Zombie McNasty. I can't imagine going back to print for my porn. Yeah.
Some of us are old-fashioned.
Sigh. Those were the days, though.
Hi, Keisha.
They had some really well-printed material back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
That's where all the slickest printing was at. Yeah.
Hi,
Hello,
Keisha.
beautiful people.
I know that one.
Okay. Zombie McNasty. That'll make it worth more. Yeah. Yeah, Ragin 2 says, I love printed porn. No search history. Exactly right. I got a little box back there still. Yeah. Reference. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's reference.
I've got those old Playboys. The articles were great.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
What was that artist that only draws from porn as reference?
Greg Land?
Yeah.
Jim Ballant. I was going to say, you may have to get a little more specific.
His entire career, he'll be known just for that. So sorry, Greg. But anyway, yeah. Great reference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love printed porn. No search history. Once it's gone, it's gone. Zombie McNasty says, but it's bringing attention to the book makes it infamous and worth more. Yeah, to the right person.
That's true. That is true.
It's only worth as much as you can get the next person to pay for it.
Yeah.
I knew a guy who had he was kind of the collectible magnet in the area. Whenever somebody was leaving town, and I live here just a little south of Flint. So we've chased entire crowds in and out over the years, as GM has risen, fallen, and outsourced or whatever. So this guy starts a used bookstore, turns into a used record store, turns into a used comic store, and a used CD store, and he just collects all of that collectible stuff. And we had a long talk one day. It was very fascinating. I wish I had put it on tape so that I could have transcribed it for later. But he pointed out that there's a wave. There's a nostalgia wave that travels with your collectibles. And sometimes you get behind that wave, the stuff is absolutely worthless. And if you're ahead of the wave, the stuff isn't worth, what it will be later. So your stuff is only worth as much as you can get the next person to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you ever want anything on vinyl by Andy Williams, he goes, I've got it. Roger Whittaker, I've got it. But that's because that wave has passed for those people. And he says, you'll never ever guess what the most valuable book was that I had come through my shop. He said he put it up on eBay, and it got into a bidding war with a couple of producers in Hollywood. And he couldn't believe it when he saw it, because it was such an odd book that he put it up on eBay instead of trying to sell it in his shops, because he knew nobody that would come in would want to buy this book. He sticks it up on eBay, and there's this big bidding war going on, and it ends up selling for this outrageous price that he could never imagine the book would ever sell. Guess what the book was about?
Swamp Thing?
No.
Men in Black?
No, these were Hollywood producers looking for research. It was a book. No, not quite. It was a book on the construction of the sanitary systems and toilets during the Roman Empire.
Wow.
Okay.
Huh.
What research was that for?
HBO was doing Rome.
Oh, Rome.
Around that time, yeah.
That was a great series.
Makes
And there was a couple of
sense.
other books or a couple other series that were coming out from that period, and that he had a book detailing
That makes sense.
the sanitary systems of Rome,
Nice.
and he said he
So,
couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe the value on that book, but it's only as valuable as you can get
Randy.
the next person to pay for it.
I'm going to run, but thanks for having me on.
Peter,
And,
thanks for coming on. Mark is here. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about Designated? We can throw that up if you want.
Yeah, Pete, you got the
yeah,
floor.
let's-
Go ahead.
Let's do that
Yeah,
quick.
it's nice having you on for 45, 46 minutes, but you're always welcome on, buddy. Anytime. Let me get that together here,
I'll
and
be back again. Yeah.
so we get talking about all sorts of weird things on this show. So. On all of our broadcasts, really. You should see some of the Sunday funnies. The conversation wanders way, way off topic. Let me see here. Here we go. You have Designated, issue 1,
Yes.
available at Kickstarter or on Kickstarter. Look at that art. Look at that.
Oh, Francesco. He's an
Yes,
old buddy
it
of mine.
is.
He's an old buddy of mine.
Francesco.
Yeah.
He's out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Let me shrink that down. There we are.
So go
There
ahead,
we
Pete.
go.
You've heard me make the pitch enough times, Pete. It's all yours. Since you're leaving, you go right ahead.
19 days ago. Tell us what it's
You
about.
don't want me to judge. It's about two alien races at war, and some Earth kids get involved and discover they have powers. It's a 5-issue series. It's drawn by Jade Smith. This is the only book you'll ever see by him, but he did a fabulous job, and I'm the inker on it. The first issue is completely penciled, inked. The Kickstarter is to get money for the coloring and lettering, but it's all it's all written out, as Mark always says. Fully scripted, 5-issue series, beginning, middle, and end, and we're really proud of it. And we hope people will check it out, and at the very least, share it out.
Yeah,
You
check
forgot
that out.
you forgot the hook. What's the hook, Pete? Do you want to mention how long this was done?
It took us a while, about 30
And
years.
And why is this the only comic that this artist will do? Is he passed on, or?
So the art was done about 25 years ago.
Okay.
Pencils.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So the story was written about 30 years ago.
Okay.
I came up with the idea. A friend of mine from high school, his brother, was like, I'll draw it. So he drew it back then.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't had contact with him in years, in decades.
Okay.
I don't think he even went on with the art comic book world. He was just a guy who just wanted to draw.
Jade Smith. Yeah.
So those pencils right there are about 26 years old.
Okay.
Nice.
And Pete inked that way back when, and then he came back to do the rest.
Okay.
Now.
So, did you make another pass at the inks, Peter?
No, I mean, I finished pages. There were a couple of pages where they were started, but I'm kind of not inking in order, so I'm jumping around a little bit on issue 2 and 3 right now.
Okay.
But issue 1, I finished a little while ago.
Cool.
Got that done.
Yeah, look at that. The coloring on that is really excellent. That is pretty Really cool. Look at that.
Yeah, we're
Some nice
we're
work
proud
there.
of it.
Yeah.
Son Godwin did the coloring, did a really good job.
And you have a Francesco cover.
We have a Francesco cover, and he tells me, Francesco says that he wants to tweak that a little bit because he's like, I think I can do a better job now. So I'm not exactly sure what the actual cover is going to look like. So that is the not actual cover that we have. But what makes this interesting is that you're talking about doing stuff digitally, is that this is the only time that Francesco has been inked by somebody else. And this was probably one of Peter's first dealings with digital inks, right?
Yep.
Right, Peter?
So I'm going to go. Mark will take over. But thank you for having me on again. And great meeting you other guys. I'll see you all again soon.
Peter, you're always welcome on the show. Any of our shows, just get a hold of me. Whoop, and he left before I could tell him to tell people how they can find him.
I'll pass that along. Everything
Bye, Peter.
is always Peter Palmiotti. Just type in that
Peter
name.
Palmiotti.
He'll pop up. Very easy. He's the only Peter Palmiotti out there in the comic world. And yes, he is related to another Palmiotti, too.
He has a YouTube show, too.
Yep. And that's designated #1 over on Kickstarter.
Right, so that's the first 22 pages since the whole book is actually written and penciled. And Pete's working on the inks right now. If we get to a certain stretch goal, we can release the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th issues in one big swoop. You would get it for free if we make certain stretch goals.
Cool. And you are at 4,244 now with only 19 backers with 19 days to go. So if you want to read this book, you're going to need to get over there and push this over. You have a $6,128 goal. That's an odd figure.
Yes, it is. It's
very specific.
It's a dual reason for that. The first reason is that when learning about this, because this was kind of thrusted on me to do it myself, I had to do a lot of research, and then every single person said, do not underestimate the shipping, the packing, do not underestimate the fees. Right. So I was like, all right, so it's going to be this much. I did my little math, and then I added a little extra. And then I was like, all right, how much for the colorist and how much for the lettering? And I put that together, and I came up with a close number to that. And I was like, I think I'll make it a unique number because it'll raise an attention. So I used to work at retail for 20 years. I worked for Blockbuster for 10 years, worked at a movie theater for 10 years. There's a reason why things are 99 cents as opposed to $1.
Right.
So I'm like, let me make it a unique number, close enough to what I actually need. And so it'll spark conversation. So that's why it's 61.28.
Nice.
And being on Kickstarter, if you don't hit that 61.28, it's not going to happen. So if you want this product, you need to get over there now and buy in. I'm going to run this video. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's basically explaining the whole thing. And it shows how many pages we have.
Hang on, folks. Here we go.
Yappa toy, and welcome to the Designated Kickstarter promotional video. This is your narrator, as well as the creator of Designated, Mark Torres speaking. As we scroll through some pages, penciled by Jay Smith, with inks by Marvel and DC's very own Peter Palmiotti, with a cover by Babe artist Francesco, also inked by Peter Palmiotti, I will tell you a little bit about the book. Designated is a 5-issue miniseries that tells the tale of 2 warring alien races, the peace-loving Forlans and the warlike Duronians, fighting over a newly discovered power source, the Capricious Star. This war finds its way to Earth, and our 5 heroes, Natasha, Kelly, Chris, Adam, and his younger brother Ed, not only wind up caught in the middle, but each gaining powers as a result. Designated has been a passion project of mine for almost 30 years. It is a full and complete story, over the 5-part series that is, and all 110 pages have already been written and penciled. With your support, you can help us get issue 1 colored, printed, and sent directly to you. Now, what Kickstarter campaign would be complete without perks? Not this one. We have a few items, such as digital and physical copies of the book, trading cards, original artwork, and few high-end collectors out there, custom-made 5- and 6-inch clay figurines as the main characters by clay sculptor Shadow Rabbit. You can see more of his finished stuff at www.shadowrabbitart.com. As I have said countless times on my syndicated radio show, It Came From Radio, which can be heard on both terrestrial and online radio stations, as well as on over 40 different podcast places. If you are unable to financially support this project, like and share it on your social media platforms. Maybe someone else you wouldn't even know about it will be able to help and be part of making this book a reality.
All right.
I figured I'd try to make it as straightforward as possible, and that took me forever to make that video, I gotta tell you.
Cool, though. You're almost there. You're under. You only have under 2,000 left to go. So.
So far, we've had some ups and downs. So I was like, I didn't know that it was a thing. So fingers crossed we can make it all the way.
Yeah, hope so. Just got to keep plugging at it and get enough eyes on it, and get people excited about it. So that's designated number 1 over on Kickstarter right now. Go over and take a look. A battle between 2 warring alien races and the teens caught in the middle. All good. That's a really pretty cover, though.
Mm-hmm.
I just tell Francesco no thanks. That cover is great.
Yes.
Maybe I'll tell them to make an acetate and put it on top.
There you go. That would work too. Yeah. For a special limited edition. And then you can get CGC to give you a 10.0.
Yeah.
You just got to rip the cover off and put a new one on.
Stunned. Yeah. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Mark.
No, thanks for letting me be able to share it.
Oh, no problem. Happy to do it. John Celestri, the great John Celestri, says Disney always used to sue preschool nurseries for painting Disney cartoon characters on their walls.
That's crazy. That's so crazy.
Ragin 2 says that mouse has always been a dick.
Yes, he has.
Says, what's up, comic peeps? Philman X in the house. Zombie McNasty says, I've seen sketch covers graded. Is that any different considering those aren't approved variants, or are they an exception to the rule? And I've never seen a sketch cover that's hit higher than like a 9.6 or a 9.7, but I could be wrong because I'm not that hip on the slabbing market.
But that's a good question. Would that be considered an unauthorized variant?
You would think so.
Huh.
Or it just might be its own animal. You know, it's like getting a sketch at a show, but instead of like a piece of paper, you gave them a whole comic book to work on. So,
Mitch, you're currently grinding, so hopefully you'll come back and join us.
You know what got me upset is when I think this might have been pre-pandemic when they decided to make the complete blank books, and they sold them for like regular price books. I'm like, wait a minute, and then you have to have somebody else draw in them. That's cheating.
That is. Yep.
I always thought it would be fun to write a script for ones, because I remember DC did one, with one with Superman, one with Batman, one with Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Write a script, but have different people do the panels.
Funny.
And that would be, hey, Jim Lee. Hi, I'm Brian. Please look at my resume here.
That'd be one expensive comic.
That would be, I better get a freaking job at DC. Probably cleaning the toilets, but still.
And even then, you wouldn't want to slab it. Not if you paid everybody to do. Yeah.
Goodness, yeah.
Yep.
Then
where's your real grade then? Yeah.
That's right.
No, it's worthless. That book is worthless.
You'd have to
Because
leave it
someone
raw
said it wasn't
for the rest of
worthless.
its life.
Yeah.
I had my Jim Lee story when I actually met him. I was at a convention in '92. Power Rangers was a big thing, speaking of collectibles, and it was in the Javits Center in New York City before New York Comic Con came along. And I was just walking the show floor, and this guy was like, hey, how much is for the pink Power Ranger doll, the action figure? Because that was the more rare one. And he was like, I'll sell it to you for a sketch. I'm like, well, who would do that? And I turned, and it's Jim Lee. He's standing right next to me, a little Asian guy. And then he's drawing a crowd, and he whips out, he gives him a sketch pad, and with a Marks-a-Lot marker, right in front of my eye, so he's right here, he draws a death blow with just the tip, the chisel end, so he uses the tip, and then he uses the flat end, makes all this thing right in front of my eyes, and I was like, holy crap, that's why this guy's Jim Lee.
Yeah.
It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, right in front of my eyes.
Yeah. It's always amazing when you see an artist do that. I saw him do not quite a panel, but a seminar. Had a bunch of in front of a bunch of kids sitting there. He just sat there and just drawing. It's great to see people like that work, who already see it in their head and just sit there and do it. I got a Gru sketch by Sergio Aragonis one time, and it was amazing. No pencil lines, just the marker.
Yeah.
Here you go. And the same thing with Johan Vasquez. I'll never forget Squee. Back when he was doing Squee, I gave him my sketchbook, and I said, I love that character. Can you give me a sketch of the character? And he takes a magic marker out and he plops it on the page, and he looks right up at me while he's drawing. He says, "Yeah, you here? You enjoying the convention? How's it all going?" And I'm sitting there going, holy crap. And then there's a great, perfect Squee right there. Squee was a little kid that was always traumatized by stuff in his closet or under his bed, or Satan himself would come in and visit him every once in a while.
It was a spin-off of
it was great title.
Maniac.
Yes, exactly. Which is a title that, nobody remembers. One of those forgotten gems out there that I tell Glenn Fleming has got a magazine that he prints from over in England. And one of these days I'm going to sit there and do an article about all of these great comics that nobody talks about anymore, that were really big back in the 80s and 90s that most folks seem to have forgotten.
Yeah, I was rereading an issue of Poison Elves this afternoon. Well, that was a book that, man, I loved it. And, unfortunately the guy passed before he could finish it.
Drew
Hayes.
Hayes, yeah.
Drew Hayes. In fact, I was just at a show this weekend.
Oh, nice.
And
Is that
picked
the
up
first
a
trade?
collection. Yes, it is. First print. First trade. Back when Sirius was still around. It became, I think it was Dog Star. They ended up becoming this unknown kid named, what's his name? Joseph Michael Linsner was art director of that company. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Great book. As soon as I saw it, $5 graphic novels.
Oh, man.
I see that in the $5 graphic. I haven't read Poison Elves in a long time. I think I'll pick that up. That was
Nice.
really cool. And I didn't have a collection of it. Then I go and I open it up. It's first print. And I'm like, oh, cool. I don't know if there was ever a second print, but I was happy.
Is that the one? Was that the version where he hated the art on the first few issues, so he just rewrote them in prose?
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a big prologue in it that he wrote, which was pretty funny for a collection, but I figured he had a couple of stories to say in the front. So that's all.
Yeah.
But
the first few issues he hated the artwork, so when they collected, he's like, I'll just write it out. Screw it.
Back when Arrow first started, we had a young 19-year-old kid, Guy Davis. He did a book for us called The Realm. And he did it, if you've ever seen, and John Celestri knows because he worked on the movie. If you ever saw Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
Yes.
That
Love
Canadian
that movie.
He had a really hardcore animated style to his stuff at that point, very assimilated off of that feel, that rock and roll feel. And that was long before he did Baker Street, long before he did Sandman Mystery Theater, long before he did The Marquee and all this other great stuff. And now he's doing art production for Guillermo del Toro. Wherever Guillermo is, Guy is there with him and drawing whatever. They've been working on Mountains of Madness, I think, for a long time.
That's awesome.
But
Nice.
he can't stand that old art style of his, and he cringes anytime anybody brings him a story with it. He doesn't do a whole lot of comic conventions anymore because he kind of got a bad taste in his mouth for the whole industry back when he was doing Hellboy. But just that and everything that he did was just incredible. No matter what style he was working in, it's just incredible stuff. So, and Baker Street also got this close to being an HBO series, and that should have happened. That was a punk version of Sherlock Holmes in England during the punk era. Would have been a great show.
That was
Phenomenal
good
show.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I also remember Peter Gross, who's done a lot of stuff for like Vertigo, and he the first time I saw him was back in I think it was only like 2 or 3 issues, but it was called Empire Lanes.
Yes.
Remember that, Randy?
An urban fantasy out of a back of a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like a portal
genius.
to a fantasy realm in the back of a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was
Empire
really
Lanes.
good.
Phenomenal. Yeah, and that's another one of those gems you never hear anybody talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm currently going through my collection and weeding out the stuff that I know I'm never going to read again.
Oh, I keep threatening to go through my long boxes. Just every time I see I go to a show like I did last weekend, and you see all of this stuff on display, and you're like going, I got that, I got that, I got that. Do I have this? Because if I don't have it, I need it. Maybe,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So I need to go through my long boxes, and especially my magazine boxes, because there was
That's
a guy
nice.
there selling old Marvel black and white magazines, just the obscure stuff.
Ooh.
I was like, Black Mark by Gil Kane.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I've got that or not, but I know I've got the story because I bought the Fantagraphics collection. But anyway, if you haven't seen that, kids, you need to look it up. It's a Barbarian After the Apocalypse, Black Mark by Gil Kane and Archie Goodwin.
Beautiful
Great stuff. But I love Archie anyway. He's one of my favorite comic writers.
Mine too. Mine too.
That's-
I still remember that one year he did on Detective Comics, with the Manhunter, plus the lead story with Batman, and it was like a different, except for one issue by Steve Englehart. Yeah, there you go.
I love that story.
That should be required reading for everyone.
Oh.
Do you have all the comics right there?
Probably.
Just the ones I love.
All the good ones.
That's the ones I love. And a few oddball ones. Knuckles,
Every time he mentions one, you're like, I got it right here.
the
I got it right
Malevolent
here.
Nun. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, that's just luck with Mitch mentioning Poison Elves, because I just picked that up. So, anytime I go to a show like that, I like to bring the stuff that I bought just in case the subject comes up. Oh, I just bought this. Look at this. This is cool. Yeah. But yeah, but that's why I have the sheet up behind me here, because I've got it's my whole basement. So if it's not boxes and long boxes of stuff that I've done or been associated with, like with Arrow and Caliber and Antarctic and all of this, or stuff that I've printed myself that I have multiple boxes for back there. It's all of the old great, graphic novels. And I've got a whole bookshelf of Showcase Presents from DC and a whole shelf of Essentials. I mean, bookshelf, not one shelf, but a bookcase, I should say, of Essentials, one of the old showcases, all of the Russ Cochran reprints of the EC reprints, most of the Ducks that he reprinted in bound volumes. My wife collects comics. I met her while I was retailing, and she's got numbers of long boxes. I've got maybe 10, maybe 12 long boxes, because I would trade all of my comics for graphic novels, collections, and hardbacks. So, but I've got bookcases of stuff. In fact, I was just talking to another collector at the show, and we were talking about stuff, because I had a death scare a few months back. A couple of them, actually. I'm on my fourth life, but I was 6 months on the respirator from COVID and had to relearn how to do everything. And we were talking about what if I had passed, would the kids have known what to sell, what not to sell? Would the wife have known? And came up with a system to kind of go through my books and mark them so that they would know not to sell it for nickels on the dollar, because I've got some books back there that can't be replaced. But anyway, yeah, I love this art form. That's why I do this podcast, because we get a chance to talk about everything associated with it, and eventually the subject will roll around. ZimmCast, we usually cover the industry, and we get opinionated, and we can talk about the industry and some of the idiots that are in it, and how great crowdfunding is, and the innovations that are coming up. And Sunday Funnies, that's when we try to put the sparkle in our eye and talk about what we love and the books that we love and the stuff we remember when we're kids. That's when we really start talking about your Spiral Rat quests and stuff like that. So that's why I love doing this podcast. And I've been podcasting for about 3-4 years now, and it's so much fun, and it's amazing the people that you meet, like yourself, like Peter. I've known of Peter for decades, but never talked to him before. And now I've got people contacting me and going, dude, I want to be on your show. Dude, I want to get back into comics. What's the current market like? What's all this crowdfunding going on? What exactly is this Ripa guy anyway? That kind of thing. you know, and it's been fun. It's a great and exciting time to be in comics, especially alternative and independent books, because there's actually people out there making livings, making a profit now. And we, back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, you did it for the love of it. I mean, you were out there grinding and getting, I was out there getting whatever job I could. If I was lucky to get 35 a page for inks, or 15 or even $5 a page for letters, I did it, you know, just to do it and get it out there, and to do comics. I wanted to do comics, you know, that was the big thing, or print yourself, or whatever. But doing this, you know, talking about it on podcasts, and the reach that we have with folks. One of the fun things in doing the Sunday morning shows, we talk to people from England. We've got Mike Jimmy from the Netherlands. We've got Marv E from Portugal. Big comic fans. You get outside of the United States, and we're all looked at as artists. I mean, real artists. Here in the United States, that most people, not everybody, and that percentage is getting smaller and smaller with every Marvel movie that breaks $1 billion. They're starting to look at us as artists. But most of the time you get looked at as, oh, you do comics? Oh, that's like kiddie literature, right? That's for kids. Or what do you do? Or you know, smut, or just a little layer above crap, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I think part of it has to do with the fact that it's such a large quantity. Because you figure for an artist, they do 1 painting, 2 paintings, maybe a year. A comic book artist, you have to churn it out and you have to pump it out all the time. So I think that in the general public's mind, it devalues what you do because you do so much.
Oh, no, because if you have a comic strip, having a comic strip is completely different from a comic book. It's the comic book, the medium, the art, the format, really, of the magazine that you'd buy in the stands and roll up and stick in your back pocket, was always demeaned and never looked at as being any kind of high art. And since comic books started, it was always the bottom barrel placement for drawing, or for, if you wanted to get in the industry, you tried to get a comic strip, because if you got a comic strip in a national syndicate, you had it made. You had more than a living. You could hire apprentices, and all you had to do was worry about deadlines and keeping your character fresh and keep that brand moving. Then after that, if you didn't get a comic strip, you looked at doing advertising. You looked at doing illustration work. You did spot illustrations for phone books or for clip art or for whatever. And you go through all of these different tiers, and at that bottom tier, maybe then you worked in comics. You know, and back in the 30s, and that, you got paid next to nothing. Look at the hassles that Simon & Schuster went through for Superman for the longest time. They signed the rights over for, you know, $130. And look at how all of these guys are treated now from these bigger companies, where the work for hire contracts and stuff, where you had to turn, in order to get paid, you had to turn over your check and sign your name at the bottom of this silly so-called contract that they're starting to wonder whether or not that was even legal to do. That labeled you as work for hire. You know, and even still to this day, DC and whoever, Discovery, Warner Brothers, or whatever, wants to cheat these creators out of their imagination and their work, their sweat equity that they've built up in these characters. That's why you get all of these pale imitations of these big icons out there. You got Miles Morales, because they're scared to death that the Steve Ditko estate is going to file suit, and they just did a couple months ago for the rights for Peter Parker. You know, there was the longest time Superboy was in question as to who owned that, because there was no contract signed for any of that stuff. They just created it. A lot of these guys just wanted to put food on their table, doing what they loved, and that was drawing comics. And that comes back to nowadays with crowdfunding, where you've got all these great creators out there putting food on their table, doing what they love. Finally, you know, it's taken almost 100 years, 80 years, 85 years, in order to get to the point where a person here, especially here in the States, is creating something, does a brand from their own sweat equity, is able to print it themselves, is able to distribute it themselves direct to the customer, and make that money without there being a half a dozen middlemen in between, or guys who gatekeep what goes on a spiral rack, or what goes in a bookstore, or what company prints what. So now somebody who's got a great idea for a comic, a great inventive idea for some entertainment, can put it together in a book and crowdfund it. And yeah, it's an uphill battle to do marketing, to get like you're currently going through with your book, to get the attention to pull people in to, you know, hit your goals and all that. But there's more and more people all the time that are turning what they're doing, what they love doing, into a cottage industry. You know, and the Brian Politos out there, the Van Skivers, the Rippas, or Eric Julys, and there's going to be more and more and more of them as time goes on. There's not going to be less of them. As long as there's people out there who love this art form and love reading it, they're going to find a way to do it and to get it out to the masses and to actually make a living off of it, which is amazing to me. That's it. That's always been my goal in doing this. Want to do what I love, want to make a living at it, in that order, you know? So, and these podcasts like this are part of it. This is bringing a whole community together and slowly but surely, if the polarization and the stupid idiot politics don't get annoying, bring people together and start, you know, introducing people to all of this wide variety of material, because all of us independent and alternative guys have been so regional for so long. You know, there's a group in the Midwest that know each other. There's a group on the West Coast that know each other. There's a group in the South that know each other. There's a group in Florida that know each other. There's a group around New York. There's another group around Boston, another group up in New England, and they all do their own works, you know, and nobody, the reach for this product has never been better thanks to the net, you know, and podcasts like this. That's why we do it.
Putting it that way makes me think of the regional wrestling back in the day. We need one guy. We need a Vince McMahon to come in and be like, all right, guys, let's get together and get it all out there for under one roof.
Well, it's coming. It's the Wild West right now. Everybody's out there getting their feet wet, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Some people figure out really quick and make it work incredibly well, you know, but it takes work. It takes trying. It takes attempts, you know, and there's failures out there. People are learning that you have to hit deadlines. You have to do a product on a dependable basis. You have to basically not screw up. And there's plenty of examples of that out there of people that have done campaigns that have been incredibly successful, and then they can't kick that book out, and you know, it's terrible. But and there's also great examples out there of people that have built their own little cottage industry, that have made machines, you know. Brian Polito's the grand example of that. That you start out small, making a couple of thousand, then you make a couple tens of thousands, then you make a couple hundred thousands every time you do a book. But the cool thing about it also is, because the reach is constantly expanding, at least to this point, I don't think you're going to see the end of it, at least in the decade or probably two, for people to find this niche industry. Once they find out how great it is, once they find out that you can do anything, you know, you're going to see a lot more people come into the market. And the more people that start creating in the market, the more people are going to be attracted to it. The more variety you get, the more viewpoints that you get, the more product, diverse product that hits the market. And by that, I'm not, you know, trying to be socially aware as much as culturally aware. Everybody's got a story. Everybody needs to tell it. You know, everybody, and I love that kind of stuff. Books and stories from different viewpoints. I love all kinds of comics that you can find out there. And a lot of other people do too. I mean, we all have our favorite niches and stuff, but favorite types of stories, but it's nothing like a well-told sequential piece of sequential art out there to me, no matter what it covers. And the more crazy, the better. Yep. And there's so many great eras out there. I'm a big comic history nut, because there's so many examples of so many cool things out there, like what we were talking, like Mitch was talking with Poison Elves, that are these flashes that come out that are hot for 5-10 years, and then they're whatever happened to so and so, you know.
Yeah.
It's just a great time to be in comics.
And the technology just gets better and better. It makes it easier for everyone to do what they do.
Yeah.
Like, I've been in more or less regular book publishing for 10 years as an independent publisher. Mm-hmm. And we're doing things right now a lot differently than we did a decade ago. And in a lot of ways, it has gotten better. You know,
And
you
you're-
still have some. You know, you take 2 steps forward, you take one
Yeah.
step back in a lot of ways. No matter whether it's comics or books or what.
Yeah.
But the technology is making this easier and easier for more people to do what they love, and I think that's a fantastic thing. And the
You're
more
seeing-
people we get into this,
Yep.
the better, the bigger we grow the pie.
You're seeing a lot of restrictions, a lot of gatekeeping just falling by the wayside, and so much. And now we're seeing the quality starting to shuffle through. Lower quality books not making as much as the higher quality books. The better marketed books making better than the lower marketing books. But the direct market, I think, was such a castration, especially when Diamond came in and became the distributor, was such a castration for the art form here in the States that it's been atrocious for like 30 years. And Marvel and DC have literally chased off more customers than they've made.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it really successfully for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And to the point now where they're right at the same point as some of these other guys. These guys are coming out and they're selling 20, 30,000 copies of books. Rippaverse is over 30,000 customers right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are what did they? I heard this morning there's like 50 or 100 books from DC in July that were under the 200 most bought bookmarks.
That's scary.
That at DC as a company, their per unit sales are dropping straight through the floor. Everybody wants to talk about how great comics are, and they are great, and they are growing. But you've got people like Dave Pilkey out there who's doing the Cat Kid Comic Club or Dogman. Scholastic's making a huge marketing push right now for Dave Pilkey's next Dogman book, the 11th in the series, not even going to be printed out on the stands until next March. But they're making that marketing push now. All of the kids are getting excited over it. He took the last couple years out to do the Cat Kid Comic Club, and he's got 4 books in that series that are out and running. And if you look inside of one of these things, it looks like an elementary school kid drew it. He's probably got it down to a science, but they're so well written, especially at the level of kids, to bring more kids into buying comics. This series especially is amazing because the whole purpose behind the comic club is you've got a teacher who's a fish, I think that character here, who's out teaching these other funny animal characters how to do their own comics. And the whole first issue is they're sitting around drawing comics, and the teacher goes through and reads their comics, and she's freaking. She's like, no, you can't. Here's this, and these kids' imaginations are going wild. There's poop jokes, there's fart jokes, there's wild violence going off in every direction, and the teacher is just having a crazy fit. You can't do that. You can't do that in a comic. Well, yes, you can, and yes, you're supposed to, because that's a release valve for your imagination.
Yeah.
And because you're doing comics, you could draw anything and do anything. So at the end of the first book, the teacher acquiesces and goes, well, okay, now I understand that you're doing it in order to vent your imagination. So in the back of the book, Dave Pilkey has this how to draw page. And the cool thing about the book, it's the teacher's reading everybody's comic. There's a different art style for all of these different comics that she's reading. And there's one that's violent, that's going around killing things. There's one that's you got little farts traveling around in clouds and all of this. And in one of them's got a page on how to draw the poop emoji on a book that Scholastic sells to kids through the schools. Nobody said anything about that book. Nobody, because it's Dave Pilkey, and he sells like 250,000 of these books every issue that he does. And they're not cheap books. I mean, if you're lucky to find them at Sam's Club, you might be able to get them for $10, but they're normally $15. But they're amazing if you sit and read them, because Dave Pilkey in the long run is going to do more for this art form than what Marvel has ever done, because he's bringing in a whole new group of people and going, not only are comics cool, not only is this art form fantastic, but you should be a part of it. You can let your imagination run crazy. You don't have to draw perfectly. You don't have to do the realistic anatomy or anything like that. You just have to tell a story. It's just amazing.
Marvel and DC right now are too busy trying to do, quote unquote, make a statement about stuff instead of, making
Well,
entertainment.
The sad thing with those companies is that the books now make so little money. The comics themselves, when they're printed and out on the stands or digital, the digital market, they killed themselves, because you had all these retailers out there insisting that you charge the same price for a digital file as you do a physical comic. And you don't get that. Shonen Jump didn't have that problem, so they create a whole platform where all the Shonen Jump stuff's available for like $9.95 a month or whatever that they do, and they have a vast library of this stuff that you can just go through and absorb. Marvel
They've been
and
around
DC,
for a long time.
They've been around for a long time. Yep. Marvel and DC have their platforms too, but their books are so muddled in continuity and then in lack of quality. Once you hit this certain mark that they ended up doing 1 of 6 for the longest time in order to fit it into a book. They have like I said, they've chased off a larger audience than what they will ever generate, period. Pilkey and this is what I tell everybody. The kids, especially the young adults, are so into this art form. They're so eager to be entertained. They're willing to pick up a manga book and read it in reverse in order to be entertained. That says a lot that Marvel and DC ought to be hiding their heads about, because you're teaching this kid how to read right to left, up to down, instead of left to right, up to down. So that when they go into college, of course, you're having all these kids now with learning disabilities, because they're having to stop on their textbook and not go right to left. They have to go left to right. But all of their entertainment, the stuff that they really read, the stuff that they love, is right to left, because it's manga. And they tried to flop the art to start with, and all of the Japanese artists all got bent out of shape about doing it. And they're not going to take the time to switch the panels around so that you can read it here in America. It's just, kids just have to catch up. And after 15, 20 years of them doing imaginative, crazy product meant for everybody to read, and Marvel and DC doing stuff that was narrow-mindedly aimed at a small demographic, mostly 25 to 55, mostly white, mostly male, all of the kids have gravitated to Naruto, Fruit Basket, Ranma 1/2, and all of this great imaginative stuff. And DC's sitting here wondering why their sales are dropping. Yeah. And on top of that, they bring in people, because they're not watching what they're doing. They're not aiming for an entertainment product. They start doing propaganda, and it just narrows that audience down, whittles it down even farther and farther and farther and farther. And what's really interesting is comics can be propaganda tools. Absolutely, have been since the start. You go back in comic history, nobody more fascinating than Charles Moulton, who brought Wonder Woman to DC, cut his own deal because he was famous at the time for that property. And that property for like 3 or 4 years was the most adult fetish-oriented property you have ever read. It beats all of the underground books to death. Just mows right over them. Every fetish that he could stick in Wonder Woman, he stuck in there. Bondage, babyism. Also, Wonder Woman used to lose her powers when she was bound together because she was a silly woman. And in order to beat that, she had to break her bonds and defeat that male. You know, he's responsible so much for the women's movement. And all of that's all tied in with a couple of, and he was only doing Wonder Woman for a very short period of time. And Peters, who was his hand-picked artist, was only drawing Wonder Woman for a very short period of time. But during that time, she sold like crazy because World War II was going on, and all of the guys overseas were picking up this comic book with all of this fetish stuff in it. And it was feeding all of their, well, not all of their needs, but most of their needs, that they could read between the lines and see what was going on. And like I said, I could talk about comic history all day. So, but it's fascinating to see that comics could be a propaganda tool. This guy was a psychologist, and he was a fetishist. I mean, we would still consider him to be a pervert to this day, a degenerate pervert. And he brought Wonder Woman to DC knowing the product that he was doing. And he did that product for a couple of years. And it got out there, and it was very, very popular. And it's taken people decades to sit back and look at that old stuff and go, God, that guy was demented. And it's like, yes, he was. And, if those books had never been out, again, he stretched the art, he showed people what the art form could be, even if it was through, sheer degeneracy.
Right.
But I don't think the underground movement would have happened. I don't think that the comics would have grown up during the 50s, which they did. They grew into a hardcore art form with EC Comics, and Mitch has got a couple of Vault of Horror covers back behind him, sitting on the wall. The Tales from the Crypt and all of this. The stories became more refined, more adult oriented. You had crime comics come out after World War II because people got tired of costumed heroes, because most of the time those costume heroes were fighting the Japanese or the German Nazis or whatever. At the time, and all of those evils were gone. People didn't want to read about those evils anymore. So you had all of these realistic crime stories come out, and they were realistic. They were very much aimed for adults. And these parents who were still thinking that comics were for kids, and there were kids comics out there also. You still had Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck raging at the time, but there was a whole market out there aimed at adults that were selling millions of copies. Crime Does Not Pay was a huge title back then. And they ended up getting into trouble because you had some crazy moms get mad, and then they
Like
pushed up against, like now, yeah. They pushed up against the market, and a lot of these publishers in that market pushed right back because Bill Gaines goes, "Oh, you want to see a horrific comic? I can draw you a horrific comic." And then the books got even bloodier and gorier and all of this until they had Senate hearings. Pardon?
Foul play. The Tales from the Crypt story. Foul play.
Oh, yes. That's the baseball
just
game.
An
yes.
Example. Yeah, that's just an example of the stuff. But
or
you had
the humanity. It's the meat.
Yeah. Crime Does Not Pay did not spare any of the realistic details that some of these gangsters, did in their crime sprees. And of course, they showed what happened to these gangsters in the end. But that didn't keep the moms from going crazy. What do you mean? There's great. There's an entire subgenre of covers out there of sharp objects coming in and poking people's eyes out.
Injury to the eye motif.
Injury to the eye motif. Yep. There's a classic Crime Does Not Pay cover where the gangster's taking his girlfriend's head and pressing it up against a stove, burner on the stove. Just crazy stuff like that. And the parents went crazy. And there was Senate hearings because these comics were so crime ridden. You had a couple of psychologists out there like Wortham do books talking about how it was degenerating, causing juvenile delinquency because they needed an excuse for not raising their own kids. And he's admitted all of that was hokum. That he did it.
Evil.
Yeah, he did it. Yeah, exactly. If it's not those evil comics, it was evil rock and roll. It was evil Dungeons and Dragons. It's evil video games. Yeah, whatever. You're always going to get that. Every generation needs its crutch to explain why people don't parent their kids.
Yeah.
But like I said, comic history is real fascinating. But because that Comic Code Authority kicked in and everybody on the newsstands had to conform to that code, and they made that code intentionally to chase off these books that were selling millions of copies at a time. The word crime couldn't be on the cover. The word horror couldn't be on the cover. You couldn't use werewolves anymore. Absolutely no drug use whatsoever. Even aspirin weren't allowed. What was the other one? Terror couldn't be used on it.
Horror, anything that was in an EC title.
Yeah.
You also couldn't use vampires, werewolves, or zombies. And policemen and people in authority always had to be put in a positive light and could never be made fun of or shown to be criminal.
And everything had to be...
Couldn't get away with it either.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Criminals always had to be punished.
Well, they were always punished before because that was the whole point of doing Crime Does Not Pay. It's in the title.
Yeah.
But that it didn't matter to these guys. And a lot of that stuff was done by the companies that were doing the kid-oriented books. Archie Comics especially was very at the forefront of pushing that Comic Code Authority. And so through the late 50s, early 60s, comics literally became kiddie material and in order to cover that code. That's why the underground movement started up. That's why the Jim Warren and the Warren magazine started up. Bill Gaines got so tired of trying to fight against the system that he took his biggest selling magazine and just ran with it, and that turned into Mad magazine. It's just like I said, comic history is just really fascinating when you get into it because of the way it works.
Yeah.
Every time there's an obstacle that springs up, somebody eventually finds a way around it, and then the art form grows. It's just like now, the politics polarized some of the professionals that have been working in comics for years. They still want to do comics, but now they're pushed out or they're blackballed from getting any type of prime assignments. So they go out and look for other ways of doing their craft and making a living, and they fall upon crowdfunding, because Brian Pulido was already out there crowdfunding and had built up that foundation and was showing, hey, if you do this enough, and if you're dependable enough, and people start to realize that you're there all the time when you say you're going to be there, you can make some money. And then you don't have to deal with any restrictions. You don't have to deal with the editor-in-chief that has a hair up his ass for whatever nepotism is going on, or the current line of propaganda that you're supposed to be purporting in your books. You do what you want. You make the product that you want. And if you like reading it, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find an audience that wants to read it right along with you. So, especially if you have a level of quality to your work, you're going to find that audience eventually if you stay out there long enough. It's just doing the work. That's the thing. Have I talked enough? Am I on too high of a soapbox?
We still have about 25
I'm just
minutes
jabbering
or so,
on.
Randy. Keep going.
We
This
can go
is
back
the
to the
ZimmCast, so
It is. Well, I guess.
if Randy's not giving his opinion, then there's no point to the show.
That's true.
Sure.
They
Is that
didn't
the
call it the
tagline?
Morris Cast,
Yeah.
so hey.
That's the tagline of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're here just to talk. Zim. Yeah, basically.
No, but you made a good point, Randy. It's like at my advanced age, I find that the
Phones get rotated.
background workings of comics, like the stuff that went on in the business office and in the editorial office, now I find a lot more fascinating than how many times, say, Sergeant Rock slugged a Nazi.
Exactly. Yep.
How many
Or
times
the-
did he meet the Iron Corporal? Who cares? It's
Yeah.
like,
How about the Jonah Hex kill count under Michael Fleischer?
oh my God, yes. Yes. That's
Mike-
impressive.
Jonah Hex, DC Western character. Michael
Yeah.
Fleischer takes to it right at the with Sergio Leone spaghetti Western days,
Uh-huh.
and he turns Jonah Hex into the most violent comic you've ever seen. But it's still code approved.
Yeah.
The bad guys all get theirs in the end, and the good guy, triumphs over evil. But
Well-
in the meantime, there's a lot of killings in those books.
Well, that's the thing. We had the comics code for, about 4 decades or so. But
50s
we still
to
had
the 70s, late
yeah.
70s, yeah.
We still had
or
some damn
mid-80s.
fine comics come out.
Oh yeah, some classic.
We had the
stuff.
Lee Kirby stuff, the Thomas Barry Smith stuff, the Wolfman and Perez Teen Titans.
You make a restriction, people will find a way around it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
Well,
they
that-
use it as a challenge
Yeah.
to, how can I present this to a supposedly younger audience,
Right.
and still not, piss off the powers that be. So,
Right.
Well,
yeah.
think
think
about
it's- I think
movies.
it's-
That's how the PG-13 came to be. They had to try to
Right.
skirt that line, and now all of a sudden
Exactly.
we have a new rating.
Yeah.
Or you
exactly.
catch
think
any
it's-
of those? You catch any of those films before the Hayes Office came in the 30s?
Ooh,
Some of
yeah.
those films are really interesting.
Ooh.
They're some of them are provocative. shall
There's a
we
great
say.
there's a great Tarzan movie out there where they go skinny dipping.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's funny that in the mid to late 70s, I forgot the exact year, but the government came to Stan Lee wanting him to do an anti-drug story.
Yeah.
And the comics code was like, "Nah, you can't do that." He's like, "But the president wanted me to do it." It's like that didn't. That line didn't overstep the comics
Yeah.
code authority.
Yeah.
So they eventually just had to run the issue of, I think, Spider-Man without the code stamp on it.
Well, eventually the code eroded into nothing because it was
Yeah.
a group of people that were gatekeeping whether or
Yeah.
not a book was going to get in, and the rules kept thinning up. Like Brian said, you keep challenging it long enough, eventually you bang your head against a wall, you're going to make a dent. So
Yeah. And then
You know,
later,
and-
DC did a 2-part Green Lantern, Green Arrow, where It was all about drugs.
Yeah.
Roy Harper was hooked on heroin.
Speedy.
And I think the Code finally realized, if we've got the two biggest publishers in America saying they don't need the Code, we better rethink how, where the boundaries lie.
Not just that, but they were getting a lot of publicity off of it. And they
Exactly.
were watching though the numbers on those books weren't, well, the Spider-Man book was phenomenal, but the Green Lantern, Green Arrow book didn't last. The sales on that weren't that big once they got past the media bump there. But eventually they had to, back off, especially with the way the stories were gradually becoming more and more intellectual, more and more adult.
Right.
And the readership was growing older at that point too. And then the direct market started up and the Code was obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So then, pretty much all bets were off. But even before that, you had everybody testing not everybody, but you had a whole group of people testing the boundaries of decency through the underground movement. Mm-hmm. Does this make you upset? And a lot of that material was made and done intentionally to see if people would get triggered off of it. Here's a story about nepotism. Here's a story about incest. Here's a story about, and I don't mean nepotism, necrophilia. Here's the most drug or addled story that you could imagine. Here's the fabulous furry freak brothers. Does that make you mad? Well, most of the people just thought it was funny. Because
it's kind of like any TV show around the 90s when you had to push that envelope. Fox was always pushing that envelope to see what they can get away with. I remember an interview with, I forget who it was, but they're like, we used to make two jokes. One was so bad that they would automatically pick up, so therefore the other one wouldn't be so bad, so it would let through.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's how Tarantino got away with so much of the stuff, is he'd make stuff that was twice as worse and then stick it in front of the movie ratings board. And they say, oh, goodness, you can't do that. Well, okay, I'll take that 30 seconds out. But he really wanted those 2 minutes to get in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And like I said, once the direct market sprung up, once Marvel and DC realized that was viable, well, everybody between that time, all of the alternative books were blowing up that weren't quite underground, but they were good independent products like ElfQuest and Cerebus. You had a whole group of books, First Kingdom and things like that had sprung up that they were selling in when the bookstores started up that you couldn't get out on the newsstand.
Yeah.
So that's what really made the comic shops. A lot of the comic shops were transformed head shops anyway. Yeah. So the stuff was more intellectual, more stoner driven type material. So crazy psychedelic years. That's back when the drugs were raw and good.
Yeah,
that's back when
characters.
Go ahead.
They had characters like Brother the Geek, I think it was.
Brother Power the Geek.
Yeah, Brother Power was just a rag doll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who looked like he was high all the time.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of books like that were just crazy imaginative, just off center. Look at the work that Kirby was doing back in the 70s. Yeah. Just insane stuff. Mm-hmm. The Forever People, the Fourth World material is way ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. But just crazy. You go back and read that stuff, it's really cohesive, super imaginative entertainment that I'm sure and later when they did reprints, when they did prestige volumes on the New Gods and that, they were selling more copies of that than what they were selling when the books first came out. Mm-hmm. That's what really led to the new X-Men being the team that it is, was because they were doing that. They had kicked X-Men out, and that was ahead of its time. Nobody could, wrap their head around the team. They canned the title, and they kept putting little guest spots of X-Men in there, and they kept reprinting the books because back then Marvel was reprinting all sorts of their classic stuff, and they were finding the reprints were selling bigger than what the X-Men books were when they were first out. So it was like, well, maybe we should start doing original X-Men books. So that's when, Lin Wayne comes in and Dave Cockrum comes in with they all have crazy ideas for characters, and they put a whole new X-Men team together. Yep. And they grab, Wolverine and whoever, Banshee from previous appearances, new characters, and just set them off on their way.
Do you think that's why the drugs aren't flowing as much now, is why there isn't as much creativity out there?
No, comics are a reflection of the culture of the time. All the comics are dated to their current time period. That's why you're seeing so much that and their lack of control at the bigger companies is why you're seeing so much political BS out there now. It's because everybody's being constantly bombarded by stupid politics. You're either A or you're B, and A can't get along with B because that's the opposite. You know, left. I like to say that old saying: left wing, right wing. It's still the same freaking bird. You know.
Was that Carlin? I think that was Carlin, right?
Somebody. I know somebody a lot smarter
Bill-
than I did said that.
Bill Hicks had the joke about
Probably goes back to Will
politicians.
Rogers, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
Probably.
That's that
Bill
kind of
Hicks
humor.
had that joke about, like, you know, the puppet on the left and the puppet on the right are being controlled by the same puppet master.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Bill Hicks was way ahead of his time too.
True.
You can listen to a Bill Hicks routine now, and it's just as relevant as it was back
yeah.
then. It's just some of the names have changed.
That's true.
You know, and he's like George Carlin, though. You know, well, Bill Hicks was really your first bitter, news.
Bitter, angry white guy.
No, not really, because Will Rogers used to do stage shows where he'd talk about the politics of the day. He'd do an entire show, or Mark Twain used to do the same thing. He'd sit in a rocking chair with a newspaper, and he'd go off on riffs. People would pay to sit in the audience and watch him sit there in a rocking chair and talk about how absurd the government was.
Yep.
You know, Bill Hicks is just an extension of that. Lenny Bruce was the same example, though Lenny Bruce got into trouble because there were
Four-letter
keywords that
words.
we still thought were naughty back in those days, and that's why he got sued for obscenity. But his humor was very topical humor. Bill Hicks really brought that out to the fore. George Carlin was already going in that direction, and then the older he got, the more he leaned into that political humor, and that's where you get your Bill Maher and your Dennis Leary especially took a lot from Bill Hicks. All your topical comedians all sprung out of there. But and Bill Hicks came from a group of comedians out of Texas that included Sam Kinison, and at the time they were out trying to find new trails and getting Rodney Dangerfield's attention, and because cable was just starting up and they needed something to put on the air. So, and Bill Hicks got that close to being big time and famous if he hadn't died of cancer. But his shows up in Canada and England were just legendary. It's I've got like 3 or 4 CDs of his, everybody recorded his stuff back when he would show up anywhere. So just about all of his routines the last 3 or 4 years of his life are all recorded. And like I said, they're all just super topical. You ever hear of Bill Hicks, Mark?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you go up on YouTube and there's a couple of great Bill Hicks specials up there.
I think
They're
there's
really
a
good.
special on Netflix.
Life is just a ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. I would say I'm going to go back late 90s. I was watching maybe early 2000s. There was a Saturday Night Live special about the only political sketches about the debates. That was their special.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it, and I'm seeing stuff, with Chevy Chase doing the Nixon stuff, and like they're talking about the same things that we're having problems right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, nothing has changed. And from
You
that
go and-
point on, I was like, it doesn't change. It's kind of the same.
You go and you look at the first year of Saturday Night Live when Chevy Chase was imitating Gerald Ford, and it always ended in a really bad pratfall. That's Biden all over again.
Except Gerald Ford fell down the stairs. Biden falls up the stairs.
That's
Yeah,
true. That's true.
That's true.
Fell off the bike. Yeah. It's just, I was like, wow. That really blew my mind, how nothing has changed after all these years. Like, that's kind of embarrassing.
Everything's a giant pendulum, and it swings. We've when you go over too far, you get that anti-whatever sentiment, and everything swings back in the other direction until that goes too far, and then it swings back again. So it's just that those swings are getting shorter and shorter, it seems. But that could just be me getting older.
Well, we live in a culture now that's where attention's very quick. So
That's true too.
that might be one reason why the pendulum is so fast and swinging.
Pops in the chat said, "Did someone say drugs?"
Like, if you think about it, there's still a war going on in Ukraine. Like, everybody just kind of forgot about that.
Oops.
Well, it's a 24-hour news cycle, and it's like after a day or two, the Ukraine thing gets old, and so you got to replace it with something else.
Yeah.
And like right now we're talking about Mar-a-Lago and the FBI being there, and I guarantee in about 2 days we'll be talking about something else. And the thing is also what a distraction it could be. And here we are way off of comics, but it's like it's like all the stuff that's going on in Mar-a-Lago, and yet the Biden administration has just passed a bill encouraging American companies to produce more computer chips, which has brought a whole lot of industries to their knees for the last 2 years. And then another like a economic stimulus that is supposed to be a major step to help us walk back some of the damage we've done to the environment. And that gets mentioned, but
ever since the 70s and us outsourcing, I think we're learning some very painful lessons that we should have learned 30, 40 years ago. About how not to farm everything out. Heaven help us if we actually get into a real war.
Oh yeah, exactly. And
you know,
it's like
because our production is gone.
Yeah, and it's become it's been this way actually since the 70s. That I live in a farming community when I was growing up, and even back then it was cheaper to get grain from Russia than it was to get it from next door.
Yeah.
So, it's and again, Mark was saying, this stuff doesn't change.
No.
We just put new names on it.
Yep. Well, we had the same problem back. A lot of the problems that we had now, we had 100 years ago.
Oh yeah,
and 1,000 years ago.
And we're going to see that. We're going to see that spring up again, especially with the Dust Bowl and all of that. Our produce and our natural disasters and that are going to kill our food supply. In a lot of ways, our supply lines are already cut in a lot of directions, and it's going to take us a good 6 months at least, or maybe even 18 months before anything remotely gets back to normal. And that's if there's not another problem that springs up.
Yeah.
Which there's, like what you said, it's bound to anytime now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but in the meantime, they can distract us. Hey, look over here. We just raided the ex-president's place, and you're not seeing the billions of dollars that are being channeled over to Ukraine now.
Right.
You're not seeing how economics doesn't make sense because the price of gold is dropping, but we're spending more money on simple everyday items. And the gold standard should be way up instead of the dollar being that strong. If the dollar was that strong, we should be paying less for the stuff that we're getting. But
well, if we were still on the gold standard, that would apply. Now we're
that's
on
true, but
imaginary fiat money.
That's sadly very true. Yeah,
we're on NFT money.
How soon before somebody points at the emperor and says that he's naked? That's the thing.
A lot of people have. No one's listening.
It's bound to happen.
Nobody will care because in 2 days something else will happen.
Well, everything's so reliant now on the dollar. Thank goodness for that, because if the ruble, suddenly becomes the recognized standard base for purchasing, we're going to be in trouble. Or if whatever the Chinese has for money, I doubt it's the yen. But if they decide to make that the standard for purchasing, we're going to be in trouble.
Yep.
But anyway,
how about those comic books, Randy?
How about them comic books, guys? Come on back in, everybody. It's okay. We don't have to talk about
after
politics.
They've left about the politics.
Yeah.
Here's a thought. What if the Rippaverse, that book, is no good? That's been sitting in the back of my head for a while. Like, everybody's putting all this money into this guy. What if the book is no good?
Well, they're going to figure that out once he starts releasing the book. The books are already printed. What gets me is that he hasn't printed any of the books or any of the pages that are finished. They're all just unlettered. It's just the artwork up there. And I wrote that when I bought his book. I wrote it in the little comments. If this book reads as good as it looks, you might be around for a while.
Mm-hmm. You might make it to issue 2.
Yeah.
We laugh about it, but how many independent comics, or even regular comics, the non-green section of the previews, how many of them have a second issue?
Yeah, but a lot of that's inherent to the system too.
True.
Because Diamond's dedicated to killing that green section. I had a Diamond rep tell me that straight to my face. The exact expression was, Diamond wants everybody in the green section to dry up and blow away.
Oh,
that's why they have always changed their hoops, and there was a point back when I was doing Arrow Comics, they were literally telling me what books I could and couldn't print.
Mm-hmm.
And when it got to that point, I was being my indignant self, I was ready to flip the bird at him and walk away.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I did for a while.
Well,
But,
they've made it very clear they just want to deal with the top 10, and that's it.
Well, there's going to be books written when all of this is done. In 10, 20 years, to show how badly, just like the Comic Code Authority, Diamond went through and crippled this industry and crippled the art form, because they told the retailers, just like they told me what I could and couldn't print. They told the retailers, you don't want that stuff. You want superhero stuff. You want to cater to that small demographic again. That's what you want to hit, and that's all you want to hit.
Yeah.
And that's why, suddenly there's no comics for girls. There's no comics for kids. They didn't grow that audience. That audience is gone. That audience is now with Dave Pilkey. That audience is now with Shonen Jump.
Yeah.
And they blew that opportunity. They've hurt the American comic market worse than, almost as bad, if not worse, than the Comic Code Authority.
Yeah.
And Diamond has been a big part of that.
Yeah, and we're going to take all the comics we think you ought to buy, and we're going to put them in the same section. We're going to push them up to the front of the book, so when your attention spans run out, you don't have to worry about spending money on any of those silly indie companies.
It's not the attention span that they were after. It was the retailer dollar.
Yep.
That's what crippled it. Well, I had a big discussion with Gary Reed from Caliber Comics, and he said the number one rule, back when you were dealing with Diamond, when Diamond was the only dog in town, you did not want to have a comic company that started with anything lower than a C, because that's why you have all of these companies, ABC in their title, because he knew as a retailer that when you go through, you get all your exclusives bought. There goes the majority of your budget. And what little budget starts at the A's and usually dies out about the end of the C's. That's why he did Caliber Press. That's why we did Arrow Comics.
I did Bevson back in the day.
Yeah.
For Capital City. So.
Aardvark Vanaheim was intentional,
Yeah.
so that he landed in the front. A+ was intentional, so that they landed in the front.
Yep.
Because in that green section, your alphabetization was everything. I did another, back when everybody used to list alphabetically, I used to have a company called Massive Comics because it fell right behind Marvel.
Ooh, smart.
So they'd see it right after Marvel. That was the whole reason to name my company that.
That reminds me of Asylum Films.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with them. That they make sure that they, because I used to work at Blockbuster for 10 years. So they made it what's the word? A mandate that whenever they were making rip-off movies, they put the movie with a similar name to whatever the big movie was. So when you put it on the shelves, it was right there next to it. So you might get the accidental rental. I was like, that's genius. I love these guys.
Yeah. That's why they did it, though.
Yeah. Like there's
that's
that
probably
movie
where
right
the majority
now
of their money came from.
with the 12 with the kids that are underneath the tunnel. There's like a big budget movie that just came out. They made one too. It was right next to it. It's a similar title. Like, man, they have no shame.
No.
Oh, of course not.
Well, comics have been the same way. Comics have always been a gratuitous industry. Look at what the Brood in the X-Men is a great example. Alien comes out, suddenly there's an alien species that the X-Men's dealing with. Yeah. They took from whatever the popular movie of the day was. They always followed the money. Wherever the money flowed, that's where they went.
Jonah Hex, Sergio Leone, like you said earlier.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, they were printing some Westerns during that period. It's just Michael Fleischer figured out that's what Jonah Hex was. He was a spaghetti Western, and that's the way that he wrote it. And he wrote it incredibly well. Spectre, his run of Spectres, the same way.
Yeah.
You've never read those Jim Aparo, Michael Fleischer Spectres. They are amazing. But the Spectre is the spirit of vengeance. He goes through and finds your weakness, and then, it's like he turns a guy into wood and then whips out a chainsaw and chops him into pieces.
Yeah.
His
what he did to people was a lot worse
stuff.
than death.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, and the legend goes that the editor, Joe Orlando, who used to work on the old EC comics as an artist, he apparently got mugged in Central Park. And he came back to the DC offices feeling all pissed off about, the way fate dealt his cards. And Michael Fleischer was a comic book historian. he actually got in with DC because he was doing encyclopedia on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and playing several others. But anyway, Orlando and Fleischer started talking, and Fleischer said, "Well, do you know how the Spectre was back when Jerry Siegel was writing him?" And of course, there's Orlando going, "Make it happen, make it happen." And they're some of the most amazingly well-written, horrific comics you will find, and they were code approved.
Yeah, because no one was like legitimately being killed. They were.
They were just being tortured, which is okay.
Yeah.
Which is okay.
Well, they might as well have been dead. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because they never said that, after they, turned the guy into a giant living candle and the Spectre lights him up, they didn't say anything about him being unconscious during the whole thing. In fact, they made a point about he's alive, he's awake, have a nice day.
Great, crazy stuff.
Yeah, great
Mitch,
stuff.
Tell folks how they can find you.
You can find me here at Linktree/Celtic Cross Studios, where you can find my online comics, social media, merch, and if you're interested in some books, you can buy some from the website.
Cool.
And
Mark,
before I forget, if you do buy from the website and you're having problems, let me know so I can fix it, because I've had some trouble with people ordering before. So let me know and I'll fix the problem.
Right there.
Yeah.
Good customer service. That's what I do.
And they can always contact you at Celtic Cross Studios, Facebook, Twitter, the usual.
Facebook, Twitter. My email's CelticCrossStudios@gmail.com.
The U-Book, the face tube, all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about that yesterday. Mark, tell folks how they can find you.
Always the easiest way, you just Google It Came From the Radio. You just type that in. We're usually on that first page, probably like 3 names down. www.itcamefromradio.com. We are a syndicated radio show. We air a new show every week. We're actually on the radio. If you happen to live in Westchester County, New York, that's 88.1 FM WARY. You can hear us there every night. The station manager says he plays us there. I don't live there, so I don't know when we air us. When he says he plays us, so he plays us.
Now, are you available on any other platform?
Yes. So we are also on online radio stations. There's BTD Radio, there's sci-fi.radio, and we're also on 40 different podcast places. So if you have a podcast, Spotify, iHeart, all that kind of stuff, just type in It Came From the Radio, we should pop up with no issues at all. And then, the book Designated, we have until the end of the month. The 30th is the last day for our campaign. Just share it out there, get it out there. It's 30 years I've been trying to get this done. Hopefully you guys can help make it happen.
And that's Designated number
yes,
1.
Designated.
Designated number 1, available over on Kickstarter.
Yes, and I almost forgot. The reason why I was late is because courtesy of the East Meadow Public Library in East Meadow, Long Island, that's www.eastmeadow.info, they give us a live show to do the second Wednesday of every month at 7 to 8 p.m. Because of the pandemic, we're virtual, so if you go to the website of the public library, you click on the event, you can register to be part of the audience. So that's www.eastmeadow.info.
Cool. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime,
and
literally.
Pete can be found at Peter Palmiotti. Just look up Peter Palmiotti. You can find him over there.
And Peter's got a lot of stuff going on. He's working on his book Retro as well.
He's working on his book Retro.
Expect to see that soon.
I know he has our book, and then also this month, I think there's like 13 days left for the Wildcat Anthology. Not Wildcats, but Wildcat Anthology. That's on Indiegogo. So if you look that up, you can find it. Yes, Wildcat.
Wildcat.
Yes.
All right.
And they're almost there. I think they're like a couple $100 before they meet their goal, and they have like about 13 days left.
All right, Brian, tell folks how they can find you.
Well, you can find me at risingtide.pub, which has links to my YouTube channel. Please go there and subscribe if you would, because we got some really cool stuff that we're working on right now. Also, on Amazon, you'll find most of my work there. We're working towards getting this out by the end of the summer. And that's coming along really nicely. Plus, I'm on Facebook. Please follow me there. Or just follow this show, because every now and then I manage to infiltrate this place and drag down the tone as much as I can. So, as always, Randy, thank you for having me.
It's always a big battle to do that.
I know.
You can't drag it. Yeah, anyway. Hit that like button, hit that love button over there. If you haven't gone to the Ragin 2 Network, make sure you go over there and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications. We are looking to grow our subscribers organically, which means we're not going out there and paying for oddball people to make up accounts or whatever and grow our numbers. We really want to make this an organic effort to get up on YouTube to the point where we can be monetized and start taking super chats and open up that tip jar. You can always reach me at thezimmcast@gmail.com. I am here for you. If you have a problem, if you have a book you want me to review, whatever, and I've got a couple of books here I keep meaning to review that folks have asked me to do it. We will do that here really soon, where we'll go through and take a look at the book, not to tear it down, but to look it over and to maybe make some recommendations to better or maybe even worse.
Give constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism, exactly. So. And you mentioned the Comic Book Spectrum, right, Brian?
Yeah, that's on every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Myself, along with some very learned people, we review some of the latest comics to be released, both mainstream and independent. Yeah. I'm probably going to be reviewing some independent titles I just got from my some of my crowdfunding campaigns this week. So we'll see what happens there, and it's always a good time. So please join us.
Yes, I have a copy of my current favorite crowdfunding book here. Anyway, yeah, there it is. I have what J.D. Calderon calls a book poop over here. Pile of books.
I've got that too. Yeah.
The great Octopus Cowboy.
I love that title.
What a great book.
What a title.
I should review that, but it would all be pretty much what I just said. What a great book. If you want to see some of my stuff, Joe Monks, a longtime horror writer, is back out printing again. He's done an issue of Sick and Twisted, of which I have a 12-page story in that I inked that he wrote.
Nice.
That you'd probably enjoy if Uki horror is your thing. That's definitely a book there. Joe Monks. You can find him over on Facebook as well. We're going to have him on the show here pretty soon. And you can, like I said, you can always find me at thezimmcast@gmail.com. I'll be back on Sunday morning, where we'll talk more about the comic industry. We try to put the fun back in funny books on the Sunday Funnies show at 9 a.m. over on the Ragin 2 network and at my Facebook page and the usual crazy places where you find the Ragin 2 podcast. Then we'll also be back next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. for another episode of the ZimmCast, where we'll talk more about this crazy industry. Before we go out the door, though, I do want to make mention of the passing of another comic icon, I guess you would call, and that would be Mr. Sid Jacobson. Has passed. I was under the understanding that he had already passed, but apparently, according to ICV2, he just recently passed on, I believe on the 24th of July. Comics writer and editor Sid Jacobson died on July 24th as a result of a stroke he suffered after contracting COVID. He was 92 years old and had a comics career that spanned over 60 years, from writing and editing Harvey Comics, one of the greatest non-PC comic companies ever. Great stuff, incredible characters that you will never see today, not in their same form anyway. The 50s, writing nonfiction graphic novels, including the graphic adaptation of the 9/11 Commission report in the 2000s. Jacobson was born in Brooklyn in 1929, had a great career in the 50s. Thanks to his sister's boyfriend, Jacobson got a job at Harvey Comics, where he stayed there for 30 years. Nepotism in action, folks. Eventually becoming managing editor and editor-in-chief. He edited every comic and wrote quite a few, working with Gil Kane, Jack Kirby, and Ernie Colin, the great Ernie Colin, and who he became a lifelong collaborator with. A man of considerable energy, Jacobson wrote song lyrics, including one called The End that was used in the second episode of Lovecraft Country, novels, and an adult comic strip for Swank magazine, back when their adult magazines actually had comic strips in them. So some great stuff in there too, especially during the underground.
Yes, that's why I bought them, the comics.
That's exactly right. He also took on the topics of the day with the Black Comic Book, a satire that recast Superman, Blondie, and other similar characters as black, and noted how differently they were treated. Captain Israel and Boychik, a Jewish superhero comic, and the JFK comic book. In 84, Jacobson moved to Marvel Comics as executive editor. There, he was instrumental in the creation of their short-lived children's line, Star Comics. Then that had Wally the Wizard and Royal Roy, a Prince of a Boy. Jacobson edited every comic and also wrote scripts for Wally the Wizard and Top Dog, as well as movie adaptations, including Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Harvey Comics went in decline during Jacobson's absence, but after it was purchased by HM Communications in '89, the new owner offered Jacobson the position of editor-in-chief. A lifelong New Yorker, he nonetheless made the move to Los Angeles and went back to children's comics. His work there included creating comics based on the Hanna-Barbera cartoons. In the mid-2000s, Jacobson collaborated with Ernie Colon on the 9/11 Report, a graphic adaptation. The book was a New York Times bestseller, and it opened up a new chapter for Jacobson during the next decade. He worked with Colon and other artists on a number of nonfiction graphic novels, including a follow-up to the 9/11 Report and graphic biographies of Che Guevara and Anne Frank, and the Torture Report, a graphic adaptation. His final collaboration with Colon, 3/5 a Man, the graphic history of the African experience, was announced by publisher Hill and Wang in 2007, but it never saw release. So maybe someday. But anyway, R.I.P. Sid Jacobson. So there you go. And Harvey's another bit of comic book history that needs a book, if it hasn't already gotten one. So, Casper the Friendly Ghost. Amazing character. So used to go out and try to make friends, and when he couldn't make friends, he tried to kill himself. Again. Anyway, those early issues. Dark Horse did some great reprint books way back, it was probably 15 years ago now, that were just incredible. Very hard to find on Amazon. I don't know why. Anyway. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. This has been the ZimmCast for the 10th of August.
Thanks, chat.
2022. Thanks for being in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark, again for being here. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Brian. You guys are welcome on anytime, especially if you can put up with my ranting. It's great. And sorry if I got too long-winded this time, but we got to talk. So.
Entertaining. It was
Good
entertaining.
times for me.
I can talk about this stuff for hours. I love this market. I love this business. And folks, if you're out there, you get a chance, go out and visit your local retailer. Go dig through their long boxes. Go dig through their backstock. Look through those great magazines. You never know what you're going to find. If you're at a convention, take a little time out. Picked up some great stuff. $5 graphic novels. How can you turn that away? Poison Elves. An entire collection of the early, done by Dark Horse of all people, of the early Marvel Cull comics, Cull the Barbarian, done by Marie and John Severin. Beautiful material. Just great. $5. You sit there. I can collect that stuff all day.
Marie Severin's a very unsung hero of comic books.
Oh yeah,
very
like
much.
she worked the history of comics for EC, Marvel, everybody.
Yep.
Very much a right person at the right place at the right time with no, not enough recognition. So,
agreed.
Yeah, worked in the Marvel bullpen for many, many, many decades. Right during, well, quite a few decades. Right during that period at their height. You know, when they were not Brand X was her title, Cull. She worked on Cull for quite a bit with John Severin doing the inking over top of her. And they were all Robert Howard adaptations from his short stories. Some great work. Great work. All right, everybody, we'll talk to you soon. Next Sunday morning, next Wednesday evening. We'll see you then. Make sure you go over to that Ragin 2 network and hit that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications. You never know when some great programming will rear its head here on the Ragin 2 network. So make sure you go and check out It Came From the Radio as well, and Comic Book Spectrum. And that's still on Thursday nights, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes, it is. All right. Still on Thursday nights. We'll see everybody soon.
Bye.
We'll take care, everyone. And we'll run a couple of video clips, and then we'll be gone. So take care. See ya. Let's find a good one here. That's so.
But you know something? Sooner or later, I rub everybody the wrong way, and well, let me think about it.
God, aren't you even gonna kiss her goodbye?
No.
Do you draw the Flintstones naked? There's a market for that.